if I answer that question you keep asking, if I give you the name of the big enchilada, you know, then it's Bon Voyage Dino. I mean like permanent. I mean like a bullet in my head, you dig? Does that help you see my problem a little better?
Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a flash of light in the bushes, and then shots rang out.
No cloak and dagger stuff, you know. They call it Operation Mongoose.
It's gonna be okay, Dave. You just talk to us on the record and we'll protect you. Now, I guarantee it.
You're so naive.
Through the looking glass here, people. White is black, and black is white. You don't believe me? All this time, you never believed me.
I just want to raise our children and live a normal life. I want my life back.
This thing's bigger than all of us.
Now, how many corpses is it gonna take for you lawyers to figure out what you want?
People got to know. People got to know why he was killed.
You know what you've done to me? I'm a dead man!
Well, if they can kill the president, they can certainly get me.
You're a mouse fighting a gorilla.
You're close. You're closer than you think.
There's going to be an attempt to kill you somewhere between here and New Orleans.
I say let justice be done or the heavens fall.
Hello, excuse my very covered appearance, but it is like the Arctic presently here. So I'm wrapped up in no less than 4 layers. The heating's on, costing me £30 every 5 minutes, no doubt. But anyway, it is the anniversary of 2 things today. 10 years ago today, it was actually the premiere of my feature film, The Journey. At the Haymarket, Central London, Screen 1. 440 people were there. We sold out the tickets in 48 hours. And that film has a sequence which owes a big sort of creative debt to the film we're going to be talking about tonight. Oliver Stone's finest hour, in my opinion. This film is also talked about in my latest book as well. But another regular collaborator of mine, when we were discussing this on another stream, said, "Oh, yeah, that's one of my favourite subjects." And I said, "Well, we've got to do a stream on this then, because I want to talk about the movie." Here he is, special bearded edition. It is History Row. How you doing, sir?
Hello, I'm all good. Thanks for having me, Lance. How are you? Other than cold,
pretty good. I think I might have to grow a beard and all, because this is ridiculous. This cold. It's not normally this cold in November. It normally drops in sort of increments. It kind of eases us in a bit more slowly normally. Now it's just gone from kind of like mild to, oh my God, we're in the Arctic. But never mind. So we're going to talk about JFK tonight. I watched it again recently, and this is a film that I watch absolutely every year without fail. Not necessarily always on the 22nd of November, which is the anniversary of the assassination. But I do watch it every year. I like this film for a whole host of different reasons. I first saw it on release at the Granada Cinema Kingston. What wasn't Granada then? I think it was MGM then. And then I liked the film so much, I went up and I saw it at the Empire Leicester Square, thinking I might see it in a 70mm print there, but they didn't release this film in 70mm because it used so many different types of film stocks. So that wouldn't have worked because you would have had a truncated, constantly changing frame. But yeah, it is a superb film. I like it not just in terms of the script, the storytelling, and the acting and the questions it sort of poses to the audience, but I love the technical things about it. Also, my good friend, the dearly departed Alan Tompkins, also worked on this movie. He actually personally built the miniature of the plaza that you see in the courtroom. Yeah, and it cost to build that cost about $30,000. So that was $30,000 of the budget right there, because of the time and sort of things they had to get, and they had to build it with the types of miniature stuff that would have been available at that time, as opposed to the stuff that would have been available now. So, you know, there was a whole host of things they had to do to build that. This is a period that interests you as well, History Bro. Do you want to sort of tell me what was your gateway drug into the JFK conspiracy, so to speak? Was it this film, or were you interested before then? Or tell me a bit more.
Yeah. Well, I'm absolutely fascinated by it. My first exposure to what happened was when I was a small child, under 10, because the film, Oliver Stone's film, came out when I was about 10. But I was already aware of it because I had this book called Mysteries. It's a kid's book, and every double page opening was a different mystery. Like one was the Mary Celeste, right? One was just about alien sightings. You know,
Roswell.
One was the man in the iron mask, stuff like that. And one of them was Kennedy. One of them was Kennedy. And I must have some of my really, really early memories, like being a 5-6-year-old, looking at like a little drawing of Dealey Plaza, and there was a picture of the almost pristine bullet, and a photo of John and Jackie. And so, yeah, by the time JFK, the film, came out, I was already aware of the JFK mystery. I don't think it is a mystery. We'll get onto that.
Yeah, because we're going to solve it tonight on the Outcome Creative Channel. We are going to solve it. We're going to tell you who and why.
Exclusive, breaking, must watch, mystery solved.
That's right.
And so
that should have been my headline. Actually, I should put that as the headline.
I was allowed to watch. I was talking to a friend about this just the other day. I was allowed to watch some relatively grown-up films when I was a kid. Like I wasn't allowed to watch RoboCop. I wasn't allowed to watch. Wasn't allowed to watch Clockwork Orange. But certain other things I was allowed to watch anyway. I was just allowed to watch JFK when I was about 11, I suppose, 11 or 12. Obviously didn't go to the cinema to see it, but now I'm fascinated by history, of course, the real story. And although I think the film JFK is brilliant, I've watched it, I don't know, 20, 30 times. I have no idea how many times. I've watched it loads and loads and loads of times. Too many times, probably. But it does play around with fact. What is historical fact? Now, I don't necessarily mind that as long as you know that's what's happening when you're watching a film. I've got no problem with it. But some people do think that things that are said or shown in this film are sort of true, and they're not always. But so it's not even really criticism. It's just something that does need to be noted.
There's a lot of there's presentation of facts in scenes when, so we know this happened and we know this happened. So what about if it was this? And then you see a shot of that thing happening, which then can be perceived as fact. So there's a lot of factual supposition, I'll call it.
I think the worst one, just to give an example straight away, there's a bit where you see somebody sort of leave a bullet on the gurney next to Kennedy in Parkland Hospital. Right? You know that bit?
Yeah.
That's just not. There's no evidence that happened or anything like that happened. For example,
but the bullet was in pristine condition, though. The one that they turfed up.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, but whether that was palmed onto the gurney itself at Parkland Hospital, I mean,
No, yeah, indeed. That it's
Right.
just a supposition of
little
maybe
things
this is
like that.
how it got there.
Well, they're not little things actually, but just things like that.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I mean, it tells the story of Jim Garrison, really, doesn't it? And his attempted prosecution. And to my mind, having read around the topic for years, it's actually a very, very small branch of the JFK assassination story. Out of all the narrative, out of everything you could say about it, it's actually a relatively small part of it, I think. Right. And as you say, yeah, I've read around the topic, so I'm fascinated by the mid 20th century, by the Cold War, by the whole Kennedy family, by the election of 1960. Fascinated by Alan Dulles, the history of the CIA, and the Cold War. So, and you've got to remember, this is the key thing I would say to remember, is we're in 1963. So it's not that long after the war, World War II, right? No. John Kennedy fought in the war. His older brother was killed in the war. All these people were in the war, one way or another. Not all of them, but, they lived through the war. And we're in the Cold War, really in the height of the Cold War. The Cuban Missile Crisis, you can argue, is probably, in one sense, the height of the Cold War. So that's one thing that must be remembered. Because when you just look at the events of what happened and what people said and did at the time, quite often it seems kind of crazy, but they thought they were in a war, a type of war. So I just wanted to stress that when we talk about everyone.
The Cold War was at its height because we'd only just come out of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And okay, yeah, that had been resolved, but it wasn't like as a result of that being solved, America and Russia were pals. It was all still right. incredibly tense. You had the Berlin airlift, not long taken place. All of that other stuff going on as well. It was very, very complex and pressured time. Not dissimilar to what we're living through now, really, in some way.
Stalin had only been dead for about 10 years, right? America, you'd had FDR and Truman, and then Ike. Right, then you got Eisenhower, and Eisenhower was the supreme commander in the war, right? So he is sort of the American war effort, and he's in some senses the personification of the American war, certainly in Europe. And then goes on to become president. So he couldn't be more of a military man. And then straight after Ike, you get Kennedy, right? So that's a complete change. You couldn't get more plugged in than Ike, right? And then you've got the Kennedys. Now, a lot of people loved the Kennedys, a lot of normal people. A lot of people hated them, really honestly hated them, hated what they stood for, that they were like this privileged East Coast Madison Avenue, that gets said, does it? Madison Avenue set. These rich kids, these kids of like Irish Catholic millionaire, Joe Kennedy, their father. That these are like the snot-nosed, ultra-privileged East Coast kids that have got a silver spoon in their mouth and had the whole world handed to them on a platter, and they're not going to fight the Cold War the way it should be fought, and they're pansy liberals, and they were. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with any of that, but I'm just saying that's what some people thought of them. Someone like many people, someone like Alan Dulles or Richard Nixon, that's exactly the sort of thing they thought. And that John Kennedy was only in his early 40s. And that the idea that this is some East Coast rich kid, and you've given him the keys to the castle, and he's going to chicken out when it comes to fighting wars abroad, assassinating foreign leaders, being ready for a nuclear exchange with the Soviets at the drop of a hat all the time. He's going to chicken out from all that sort of thing. That he's talking about imperialism, American, Western imperialism as a bad thing. This is at odds with many in the establishment at the time. So anyway, I'll just set a few of those things up. But maybe you want to talk about the actual film.
Well, yeah, no, it's good to I mean, as everyone knows, we don't do politics on this channel, but we are going to discuss politics where it's relevant to this movie and the context of it. Probably one of the few times we'll really get into that. No, absolutely. I feel it's vital, especially if we're going to solve the mystery of, who killed him and why. And that's the real thing, as Donald Sutherland says. Why was he killed? Who had the power to do it? Who had the power to cover it up? Who benefited? So the movie opens with this: to sin by silence when we should protest makes cowards out of men. Ella Wheeler Wilcox. Do you know who Ella Wheeler Wilcox is?
I don't.
Yeah, do you know what? It's funny, but I have to say, I've never actually looked up that name, and I'm going to do it now. American author and poet. From 1850, she died in 1919.
Okay.
So I'm guessing probably one of the first really famous female poets, perhaps.
I mean,
not
that famous. I mean, there's various. That's a paraphrase of Edmund Burke said about how all it takes for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. Tacitus, the ancient Roman, talked about how if you lose your tongue, then you may as well be a slave, sort of thing. So there's many takes on that theme.
Andrew Musgrave says, just mentioned 13 Days. That is another very good film. I really do like that movie. Saw it at the cinema. Also own it. Annoyingly, it's an American import that I've got, and my free region DVD player is broken currently, so I can't play all my Region 1 films. Very annoying. So one of the things I really like about this movie, I mean, there are many things, are the opening 10 minutes. And the opening 10 minutes is this incredible, eclectic, massive, I mean, it's massive exposition, which normally is not something I like in a film, but here it's completely justified. It completely works. And what Oliver Stone does is he gives us this fast-paced, and it gets faster as we build up towards the Kennedys arriving in Dallas, Fort Worth. All of the history that leads up to this, Bay of Pigs, etc. We've got a monologue that's being spoken, which I think is being said by Martin Sheen, if I remember rightly, who's talking about it's the voiceover at the beginning where it's going through Kennedy's recent history, and it's the same guy that says rumors are abound that Kennedy's soft on communism, etc., etc., etc. That actor who's doing that voiceover is Martin Sheen, who was one of the first people to play Kennedy in a massive 2-part TV series, which was the first time I ever even knew that he had been shot, because I watched that with my dad I think it was probably, we saw it about like 1979 or 1980, something like that. And as this sort of sequence plays, I won't play too much of it because we'll get calm now. Coming up to the location in question, and there's the window, the sniper's nest, as it's called. The Zapruder film. Again, that would be like a stage shot with the girl. And then we hear the gunshot. Boom. Now, that opening sequence for a movie of this type, I personally think is brilliant. I think it's one of the best pieces of filmmaking I've ever seen, because it's quite difficult to capture the audience's attention when you're giving them so much information in such a short period of time. And this is all just a prologue, really. This is all just giving you, this is what happened up to that point. So you go into the rest of the film, if you came into the cinema with no knowledge of anything, you're now going into the rest of the film with a basic knowledge of that. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that before we move on.
Pardon me. Yeah, it's a great sequence. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course, the like real Zapruder film spliced in with things he's done, and just from a filmmaking point of view, it is very good, and I suppose it does set up. You have to pay attention, but it does set up for people that might not know anything about it.
Yeah.
I do feel like Oliver Stone. Well, obviously, Oliver Stone is a massively interested in, a massive fan is sort of the wrong word, but a fan of the thing. And so whenever you do that, it's very easy to get carried away and assume people know more than they do. Assume everyone knows as much as you do about something. And then when you try and explain something as if they're 5 years old, you then can quite easily go the other way and just be patronizing. So you're right. It's a balancing act between going over people's heads and being patronizing. And it obviously it does it perfectly. It does it very, very well. The Nightmare on Elm Street. And of course that's the real building. So
it is.
Yeah, it's a great sequence.
That's a mention of the John Williams score. The John Williams score for this film is amazing. It's one of his best, without a doubt. So before we get into the movie, have you been to Dealey Plaza?
No.
Right, I have. I went there for the first time last year. I've got all my photos. They're annoyingly they're on the other computer. Otherwise, I'd put them up. But here we are. And one of the things that, first of all, Bo, if you do ever go there, be warned. There's a whole cottage industry of all these guys running around the road with these kind of 12-page pamphlets of exclusive photos of the assassination that you've never seen before, and they're like hawking them to you for like sort of $5 or $10, and literally they are on you like flies as soon as you arrive there. You know, if you're a tourist. But I mean, they're polite with it, but it is this whole little cottage industry. The other thing is, if you look at the road, these X's are where the bullet hits happened, and they are actually painted on the road. So they've marked them. There's another one there just behind the truck. They've marked them in the streets. The picket fence area is there. Not much. There is a picket fence there, but it's not the original one. You can see there's a couple of tourists up there. When you go up there, there's all kinds of graffiti and whatnot. But one of the things that really strikes you about this, which Google Earth doesn't really convey, is what an absolute perfect place it is for this ambush. I mean, it really is quite tight. It's not as in the film, the area still feels quite big, but once you get to this section, this is a proper bottleneck right here. And I've been to the museum, and you really would love the museum. So this has all been converted into a museum. You take the lift up to the top floor first, or the second from top floor, where the assassin's nest is, as they call it. And that's all been preserved. You can go and have a look at that. There's a really good, slightly biased overview of what happened. Well, I use the word slightly softly there. It's certainly not my view. It's very much just kind of, this is what's factually known, and this is what the various committees have said. It doesn't sort of go very far beyond that, which I thought for a museum about the assassination was a bit piss poor. But all the stuff they've got there is really good. I saw a lot of footage I'd never seen before, things of that nature. So it's quite a well-preserved site. If you go about either 3 blocks this way or 3 blocks this way, this part of the city is absolutely deadly. There are huge gangs of people hanging around on the street corners who really, really unsavory characters. I was proper scared. I won't lie. And there were a lot of police like wandering about, and I was like, good, I'm going to stay here then. I would definitely not come down here at night. Absolutely no way. Downtown Euston felt like a very much a no-go area. But I was there in 2022 on that disastrous trip where everything went wrong. The middle part of the trip, which included this visit, was the nice bit. So I got to go there. So if you do ever get a chance, I'd definitely recommend it.
Yeah,
because I think you would find it very, very interesting. So Yeah, so we have that opening sequence, and then we basically cut to, I think we cut to Jim Garrison in a bar in New Orleans where the news is announced, and you get that shot with the clock, and you kind of hear the gunshot, and I love all of that editing, that style. This film has a particular style that really works for a drama documentary narrative, where Stone is really giving you kind of raw and visceral images to make you feel like you can feel what happened at that time. You can put yourself there. I think that's one of the things about it I really, really like. Yeah. So, and then we go into the first scene with Costner. So yeah, let's talk about Jim Garrison a bit. I assume you've read his book On the Trail of the Assassins, or one of the books upon which this film was based.
I haven't read that. No.
Oh, right.
No.
Well, that's the one that he wrote, and it was one of the sort of earlier books that came out about this type of thing. I mean, you know, he had a cameo in the actual movie as well.
Yeah, right? Yeah, he plays Warren, doesn't he?
He does, yeah.
Yeah.
Quite sort of like appropriately. I think he had quite a lot of fun making him as appropriately sort of grumpy and curmudgeon as possible.
As I say, I feel like the Garrison prosecution is like a tributary thread of the narrative of the story.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned the Donald Sutherland scene, because that's my favorite bit in the whole film. In a way, the Jim Garrison thread is exactly that. It's a bit more like window dressing, putting on the story of who's Tommy Lee Jones.
He plays the guy that they were prosecuting.
Yeah, what's his name?
The character name is, so I'll probably say it in the chat in a second. Hold on.
His name?
No, it's because he had two names, didn't he? He had Ray Shaw, isn't it? Ray Shaw, and then
Clay Shaw.
Clay Shaw.
Yeah.
So Clay Shaw.
I mean, he's a very, very peripheral character. Or Clay Bertrand, someone. Musgrove. Thanks, Andrew. So it's a very peripheral thing, right? He any way you look at it, he would not have been a key player in this conspiracy. So, I've never read Jim Garrison's book. Is it worth it?
I mean, I think it's entirely from his perspective. So, as you would say, it's a thread of a very complex picture. But what's historic about it is he was the only person to bring a case, and I think he definitely should be commended for doing that. But let's talk about a couple of different aspects of it, and I before we'll save our discussions of who did what when we get to the end. But one of the things that's really interesting in the extended version of the film is this scene, and one of the things that comes up is that I think it's a relative of Alan Dulles who Kennedy fired, I think, from his job. So they weren't friends, if I remember rightly, because Alan Dulles was the head of the CIA, right, at one stage. And
absolutely, he was head of the CIA from inception until 1962. Yeah.
So if you remember in this scene, the person who could change the parade route for Kennedy was the mayor of Dallas, and the mayor of Dallas was a relative of Alan Dulles.
Well,
and that's
sorry, not quite. It's Earl Cabell was the mayor of Dallas, and he's the brother. He's the brother of General Cabell, Charles Cabell. Now, Charles
Cabell, that's right. Yeah, who was one of the people that was also fired by Kennedy.
Right. Yeah. So Charles Cabell Charles Cabell. So he was a general, but back then the CIA and the military worked much closer together. sometimes the CIA would need the military to do something. The CIA literally say, we want the US Air Force to fly the U-2 over XYZ. And the US Air Force do it. Or the CIA say, we need a bunch of M16s or something. And the US Army said, okay, there you go. So there'll be certain generals that are sort of work with the CIA, essentially. And anyway, Charles P. Cabell was one of those. Yeah. And his brother, Earl, was the mayor of Dallas, which is a remarkable connection. It really is a remarkable connection. And yeah, he was when John Kennedy wanted to first try and rein in the CIA to some extent. Yeah, he got rid of a few people. He got rid of Cabell. Eventually, he got rid of Alan Dulles himself. Now, I suppose a quick word, we can start talking about things. Got to say a few words just to start talking about Alan Dulles. So, Alan Dulles, his older brother, John Foster Dulles, was a Secretary of State. So he was the equivalent, the American equivalent of our Foreign Secretary. Extremely powerful, one of the most senior politicians. So for a while there in the 50s, John Foster Dulles controls American foreign policy largely. Of course, the buck stops with the president, of course, but he and his little brother Alan Dulles controls secret foreign policy. Essentially, Alan Dulles described himself as the Secretary of State for unfriendly countries. There he is. There's Alan.
Yeah.
There's Alan. And now, so he was the CIA in so many ways. He was an old OSS guy. He spent most of the war in Bern in Switzerland. And he was just an extremely senior, because there was no CIA during the war. He was one of about half a dozen guys that were as senior as you could be in the OSS. He sort of handled spy rings in Europe on behalf of the United States. And he did all sorts of, he helped smuggle out a whole bunch of Nazis.
Yeah, that's right. I read about that.
The Nazis obviously had an intelligence network. And when it looked like the war was definitely going to end imminently, America, like they wanted America and the Soviets, both the Allies, Western Allied democracies and the Soviets, wanted to get their hands on all the best German scientists, all the best German intelligence officers. They both wanted them, right? So anyway, Alan was involved in that. And so when the war ends, I mean, he's a lawyer first and foremost. And he's also got a massive connection of friends that are lawyers and power broker people in Washington, what they used to call the Georgetown set, sort of the upper crust, the powerful people that live in Washington, D.C. So he's also got a massive set of friends, acquaintances in the publishing industry. So he can literally ring someone up in New York and say, I want a certain article written about something. And he can make that happen. That's an extraordinary amount of power in of itself, that sort of thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
He was friends with, or people wanted to be friends with him, all the right people, all the most powerful people in Washington, D.C. Right? So when Truman decides to set up a permanent foreign intelligence capability, the CIA, John Foster Dulles, and it's sort of around when Ike gets in, John Foster Dulles makes sure that his baby bro gets the job. So from inception, Alan Dulles is the head of the CIA, and all the way until 1962, when John Kennedy finally fired him, essentially, or kicked him upstairs, pin a little medal
which
on him,
obviously wouldn't have gone down well. And
not at all.
Cabell was one of the other people that was fired, and Cabell's brother was one of the people that could change the parade route. So one of the things I want to check with you is, was it true, not right at the last minute, but relatively soon, the parade route was changed?
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's crazy to take that turn onto Elm. Why?
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. But beyond that, also the fact that they didn't put the bubble. There was this thing called the bubble, right? This sort of bulletproof or at least semi-bullet resistant clear plastic dome that you could put over the top of that Lincoln convertible.
Yeah.
As protection. Somebody decided to take that off. The idea that you have outrunners, literally Secret Service guys running alongside the limousine at all times, ready to physically jump on him if bullets ring out. That was removed as well. In fact, there's a clip. There's quite a famous clip of it was caught on camera of pretty soon before the shots happened, like just a few minutes before, that outrunner service being called off. You can see the Secret Service guys running alongside, and then like turning around. They've obviously hear a shouted order to stop, and they like turn around and sort of raise their hands, like what, why? What are you talking about? What's going on? So the Secret Service, who controls the Secret Service? Who gave that order? Who controls the Secret Service? Well, the Secret Service back then came under the auspices of the Treasury Department. Strangely, if you was secretary, if you was in the cabinet, the secretary for the Treasury, you controlled at least the purse strings for the Secret Service. Right, so that's sort of that's a key thing. So who was that? Well, it's a guy called Douglas Dillon, C. Douglas Dillon. Douglas Dillon was just an extremely powerful man. Again, just part of the inner clique of powerful people in and around Washington, D.C. He was on the Council on Foreign Relations, an extremely powerful committee. He had been a national security advisor. He was on the National Security Council. And he was the secretary for the Treasury in 63. And just happened to be one of Alan Dulles' closest friends. Not just a political ally and confidant, but actually a friend. I mean, him and their families would go on holiday together. There you go. There he is.
Right.
They'd literally go on holiday together. A lot of them like to. Now, I am implicating Douglas Dillon in this. I'm not necessarily implicating David and Nelson Rockefeller. However, the Rockefellers, particularly David Rockefeller, was one of these people, a bit like Victor Rothschild, who has a giant clique of friends, quote unquote friends. And Alan Dulles and Douglas Dillon were in that. They would often, lots of people would go on holiday to the Rockefeller estate. And so the point I'm trying to make here is that Dillon and Dulles were thick as thieves. And I think if there was any sort of conspiracy, they would have been at the heart of it. In fact, must have been at the heart of it.
Yeah.
So, okay.
So, yeah, I think just based on exploring the topic of the parade route alone and who had the power to change it.
Yeah.
The answer to that is that Cabell's brother would be able to change that route, no problem. Then you're talking about who strips away the protection of the president. Well, that would be this man, Douglas Dillon.
I'll just say that the mayor of Dallas wouldn't be able to change the motorcade route. He'd have to green light it, sign off on it. But it'd be the Secret Service that change it.
Which would still come under the purview of Douglas Dillon, right?
Yeah, exactly. But you would have needed, you definitely would have needed, or you would have wanted the authorities in Dallas to rush through or green light anything you want to do.
Yeah,
for sure.
So they could have suggested the parade route and got the mayor to sign off on it, who would have effectively been a silent partner in a way, even if he didn't know anything more than that. And because I do feel the way that this started is very much how, we'll come on to it in a bit, but it's very much how Donald Sutherland's character describes it starting. Somebody make the phone call to somebody, we're going to do it, and okay, what do you need me to do? And rather than, I doubt there was an occasion where 10 of them got in a room and sat down and planned it out. There was certainly an occasion where a load of them got in a room and slagged Kennedy off and were very unhappy about it. Ideas were probably mooted, but I don't think there was a time when everybody sat in the room and planned it out. I think it was all done at stages and different levels where people were disconnected from each other for exactly the safety that would provide. That's my gut feeling. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is the crux of it, isn't it? This is the very crux of it, the conspiracy theory. I see one or two people in the chat, Darth Plato, for example. No, get used to it. I'm going to talk about the conspiracy loads in this stream. If you want just straight up talk about the film, well, that's not exactly what I'm here for. Happy to do it.
We're going to talk about both, and we're going to kind of digest them as we go. And but I do want to hear both theories.
The conspiracy, I believe that the prime mover was Dulles himself. Now, the way it must have gone, is that he must have approached a number of people, a good half a dozen different people. And if any one of those people had said no, then it wouldn't have been able to happen. But we do know that John Kennedy was shot through the head that day. So each one of these people must have said, there's a green light. I'm going for this. So this is how I imagine it went. Alan Dulles goes to his kill teams in the CIA. Now, these are people like Jim Angleton, James Jesus Angleton. Could talk to you all about Angleton for a long, long time. Fascinating character. He would have gone to somebody like that. Somebody maybe like Richard Helms, Dick Helms, who went on to be head of the CIA himself years later in the 70s. Maybe someone like Richard Bissell. Maybe someone like Bill Harvey. He would have gone to somebody like James Angleton and said, if I wanted to assassinate John Kennedy, just technically, just physically, logistically, is that possible? Is that something we could do? And obviously Angleton, or whoever it was, said, yes, boss. Right? Okay. Right. So, because that's what they do. That's what they had done, particularly in the 50s. The CIA assassinated quite a few people. Right. Again, it's a matter of record. Like Diem in South Vietnam, Lumumba in the Congo, Trujillo in the Dominican Republic. They tried to assassinate loads of other people in Central and South America. They tried to whack out the beard, right? Fidel. They had multiple attempts to kill Fidel. Okay, so they're not green to this. It is something they have done or do. Okay, so okay. Alan Dulles is then, if he wants to go further with this thing, this conspiracy, this idea, he knows that his guys in the company would be capable of doing it. I don't know who he would have approached next, but next he must have talked to Douglas Dillon. Say, look, we would need the Secret Service to essentially fail that day in loads of different ways. We would need them to spirit his body away from Dallas when we need them to. We need the Secret Service to be, whether they know it or not, we need the Secret Service to be doing our bidding on this thing. Now, if Douglas Dillon had said, no way, you're crazy, I'm going to pretend I never heard that, then again, it would have been a no-go. But you can only imagine, or it's my supposition, that Douglas Dillon said, sure thing, Alan, that son of a bitch Kennedy is going to get us all nuked or whatever. Right. So then he must have approached Lyndon Baines Johnson. And that's what even Jim Garrison in this film, right at the end, in the court scene, right, ends up accusing LBJ of it, because they must have they would have absolutely have needed the ability to manipulate the narrative after the fact. Now, that means having control of the Warren Commission. Obviously, before it happened, they wouldn't have known it would have been called the Warren Commission. They know there would have been some sort of investigation into it. And so they need to be able to control that. And that would only really come from the president. So I imagine Alan Dulles, and maybe now with people like Angleton and Douglas Dillon, approach LBJ and say, what if we wanted to do this? Would you be on board? And if LBJ had said, no way, you crazy SOBs, again, it wouldn't have happened. But you can only infer that LBJ said, yes, let's do it. Now, quick word on LBJ. Again, could go into so much detail about LBJ, so many books written about it. But LBJ was a dodgy dude, right? He was, by the early 60s, he was extremely rich, owned a massive amount of property and money. But it's the sort of money he shouldn't have had. It's like, why are the Clintons and the Obamas so fantastically rich, and Zelensky? Anyway, the point is, he was a corrupt dude, right? Corrupt dude. And he was involved in lots and lots of legal cases, all about corruption, going back years and years and years. There's a guy called Bobby Baker, extremely dodgy character, Bobby Baker. Anyway, LBJ was that type of politician that is constantly having to go to court over dodgy dealings, nearly always to do with money. Not always, but nearly always. Now, LBJ, was only picked to be JFK's VP because of the political numbers. He would bring the South. But for JFK's re-election campaign in 1964, everyone that knows said that he was going to probably drop LBJ and go with somebody else. LBJ had become political baggage. He was going to drop LBJ, and LBJ was probably, and this might sound a bit crazy, but it's not, may well have gone to prison. If he hadn't become president, LBJ could have gone to prison in a not too distant future. However, when you're president, you've got immunity from prosecution and all sorts of things. So when someone like Dulles comes to LBJ and says, what about this? It's a get out of jail free card for LBJ in all sorts of ways. So, okay, going on with the conspiracy. At that point, then, if you've got someone like Douglas Dillon and LBJ on board, and the company itself can actually do the thing physically, then it just comes down to the actual how was it done. And that is murky and weird, and there's loads of things that are inconsistent and stuff. Later we'll talk about.
Let's get into that later.
Yeah, let's go back to
but I think your theory that you've advanced with the characters you've mentioned is very much in line with my own thinking. How much LBJ knew about it, I'm less sure on. Be interesting to do a stream with you about the LBJ film. I don't know if you've seen it, the movie with the guy from Breaking Bad. I mean, he nails him. He gets him. I think he nails him as a character. How true that movie is another.
Have you seen Nixon as well with Anthony Hopkins?
I have.
Oliver Stone. That's also a superb film, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I felt Hopkins was a little miscast, but he did a bloody good job of it, though.
Yeah. When I first heard of it, I was like, really? Anthony Hopkins as Nixon? Are you kidding me? And then he does it really well. I think he does it really well. Yeah.
Well, we'll go into let's talk more about the movie. So again, really, as part of an extended title sequence, you'll really hear you get introduced to loads of other characters. We cover really before the film even gets going. We cut to Kevin Costner and his team, or Garrison and his team, hearing about the assassination in the bar, or first of all on the radio. Then they go to Napoleon's, which has got a TV set as the line. Not everybody had a television back then, and the real footage of the famous guy reporting on the death of Kennedy. Then we cut to Guy Bannister and a wonderful actor here. Guy Bannister was somebody who previously worked for the CIA, as I understand it, now retired, working as a private investigator in New Orleans, had connections to Oswald, which are explored in the film. And we have this clip with he's killed like right on live TV. So let's talk about some of the characters that we're introduced to in the JFK movie and maybe where they fit in particular I want to talk about. Let's talk about Oswald and David Ferry.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
Oswald first. my thoughts on him, having read and digested a fair amount of material and outside of this film, of course, but I do believe he was a patsy. I don't believe he fired the kill shot. He may well have been involved. He may well have thought he was there to be part of a team that was to protect the president, even to, you know, maybe shoot, take out other assassins. Whatever he thought he was there to do wasn't what he was there to do. But everybody says he was a poor shot at best. That rifle also is a notoriously awful weapon. And that's got to be the worst place to do that shot from, especially with the tree with the foliage in the way and so on. The way that he came to end up getting the job at the book depository is also very interesting, and you can trace that back to various connections, which isn't straightforward. It's not like he saw the job in a paper, he applied and he got it at random. He was definitely posted there very deliberately, in my view. In terms of the photographs being tampered with, that's difficult to say, but they do look off to me. Being a photographer and, you know, knowing how photographs could be manipulated even back then with, I guess, what you would call an early version of physical Photoshop in a way, by photographing things over photographs and retemplating things, this kind of stuff. So I think it's interesting. He is an enigma. It's difficult to know quite which version of him is the real person. Was he actually quite a clever agent who was duped into a position of falsehood, or was he a dummy who thought he was being given a great job, who was duped into a position of falsehood? What are your thoughts on that question?
Okay, so Lee Oswald.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously,
and we must say also in the movie, what a performance from Gary Oldman. He's brilliant in the role.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so Oswald, obviously one of the most pivotal people in this whole story. First of all, to say, just straight off the bat, tell people where I am. I completely agree with you. I think he's exactly what he said he was: a patsy, a fall guy, a scapegoat. Okay, so the first thing to note, so I got really deep into reading up all about Oswald a while ago, like 10 years ago. I decided I want to read a biography just of Oswald and watch some lectures and things, just focusing on Oswald. Like, who is he? Wait, well, stop everything. I want to know everything there is to know about Lee Oswald. And I called him Lee Oswald because that was his name. It sort of removes people. It's like Lee Harvey Oswald. It's like this call and response thing. Lee Harvey Oswald, like he's a character. No, he's a guy called Lee. It was Lee Oswald. Okay, so who was he? Now, you're right to say he's an enigma. Yeah, he led a crazy short life. Remember, he was only he just turned 24 when he himself was murdered. He's a young guy, right?
Yeah.
24. I know we're getting up there, Lance, but we're both old enough to say that when you're 24, you're still, I don't mean to be patronizing 24-year-olds or people that are younger, but you're still a kid really at 24, right? You're still very young when you're 24. Okay, so I think that's worth noticing. He's not this grizzled intelligence service operative who's been round the world and been round the block and is ultra cynical and all that. No, he was still a kid sort of thing. Now, the takeaway thing about Lee Harvey Oswald, and this is what most of the researchers always say about him, is that he's got the so-called fingerprints of intelligence all over him, right? He was absolutely involved in the world of intelligence and counterintelligence, 100%. So, but as I say, I think he was a patsy. I definitely don't think he shot a rifle that day. He wasn't in that window firing that rifle. I honestly don't believe that. So, okay, quick thing to say then about his background. So he's in the Marines. Some say he was a sharpshooter, who's an excellent shot. Some say he's a terrible shot. Now, that sort of thing, why can't we be clear? Why can't we know for sure? Which one is it? Well, this is one of the things the intelligence services do. This is one of the things, one of their main tools, the intelligence service, is to muddy the waters, is to give out truly misinformation or disinformation, just simply to make things confusing. That's one of their most powerful tools. Was Lee Oswald a good shot or not? It should be a matter of record, but yet people disagree over it. Okay, so anyway, he was in the Marines, the US Marine Corps. Then, still as very young, like he was like 20 years old or something, he's picked out to go to Japan and work on the analysis side of the U-2 spy plane intelligence stuff, right? They don't just pick some random US Marine Corps grunt straight out of basic training to do that sort of thing. It just doesn't happen. He was handpicked by someone somewhere for some reason to be singled out to do sensitive work. Everything I'm saying here is a matter of record. Okay.
Yeah, no.
Then later on, and there's other things. There's other sensitive things he was sort of involved in. Like nothing particularly crazy, but you know, not your average 20-year-old Marine Corps cadet dude. Nowhere near. So he then decides he wants to defect to the Soviet Union. And as I said earlier in the stream, remember, we're in the height of the Cold War, the absolute height of the Cold War, right? He reckons he wants to defect to the Soviet Union. And he does. He turns up a Soviet embassy and says, I've been in the Marine Corps. I've worked on the U-2 spy plane stuff. I know secrets, but I want to defect and become a citizen of the Socialist Soviet republics. Now, okay, so there's that. So again, that's a matter of fact. That's a matter of record that happened. Now, what's going on here? This is where the conjecture starts. What's going on there? What on earth is that about? Is he legit? Did he really want to defect? Almost certainly not, because he comes back after not too many years. What I think, and what most people think, is that he was a false defector, that the American intelligence services say, pretend to them that you want to defect, and then once you're over there, glean whatever information or intelligence you can and feed it back to us, or at a later date, come back and tell us all about it. That is not uncommon. Again, that is exactly the sort of thing intelligence services do. It wasn't Lee Oswald was the only person they get doing this. They get loads of people doing it. The Soviets were doing exactly the same thing. The Brits and the Germans were doing it to each other during World War II. This is bread and butter. This sort of thing is bread and butter, right? So Lee Harvey Oswald does that. And the Soviets don't buy it. They clearly don't buy it for a split second. They're like, okay, yeah, this guy straight out of the Marine Corps who's worked on the U-2. You reckon you want to be one of the Soviets now? Yeah, sure. Okay, yeah, we believe you. Sure, buddy. And they just play along with it. Again, it's a bit like having diplomatic missions where both sides know they're just spies, each other's spies. But they go through the play of it all. They let them live in your country for a while, and you keep an eye on them, and they keep an eye on you, keeping an eye on them, and on we go. Round and round we go, right? But so the Soviets didn't buy the Lee Oswald thing, and they just let him live in Russia, give him a job in some factory, give him a crummy little apartment, and just keep an eye on him. Don't let him anywhere near their secrets. Don't let him anywhere near their airfields or their submarine pens or anything like that. They just don't buy it. They saw it a mile away. So he lives there for a few years. He actually marries a Russian woman,
Marina,
and has a kid. And then he's obviously getting nowhere with this, or for whatever reason, he decides he's going to come back to the United States, re-defect out. Now there is absolutely no doubt that he's intelligence, because if that were legit, if he was a legit person that wanted to defect to the Soviet Union and then defect back, the Soviets wouldn't like that. They'd put you in prison for that sort of thing, might even kill you. The KGB would be all over you if you started saying, oh, I want to go home now. But they just let him go. Then when he arrives back in America with his Russian wife at the height of the Cold War, you would think at the very, very least the FBI might want a word with him. You might think the CIA themselves might want a debriefing with him. They might be all over him. Or that the Americans, you might think the Americans just would refuse to let him in. You're a defector. You're a traitor. No, he's just let straight in, no questions asked. This is intelligence. The fingerprints of intelligence are all over Lee Oswald. There's no doubt that he was up to his neck in the intelligence community. Now, okay, so I've set all that up to say, when it comes down to the 22nd of November, 1963 in Dealey Plaza, I think he was a patsy. I think the CIA had multiple people that they could point to and say it was this guy. They'd be playing all sorts of head games, all sorts of crazy 4D chess head games, but we haven't even got time to get into here. That there's multiple Oswalds. That one was seen in Mexico City, and I don't want to get too tinfoil hat about it. But the point is that the intelligence services play crazy multi-layered games of misinformation and disinformation. And one of their guys, a patsy, was Lee Oswald. Lee Oswald, as far as I'm concerned, looking at the evidence, wasn't on that floor. He was in the book depository building when the shots rang out.
Yeah.
And he probably wasn't on the 6th floor. He was probably on the 2nd floor. At the very most, I would say, sorry, Lars, I'll let you speak in a moment. Just a couple of quick last points. At the very most, I would say Lee Harvey Oswald knew that something was going down, may have been a spotter for another shooter, but that's at the absolute outside limit of what I'm prepared to believe. I think he had no concept that the president was going to be murdered that day. And that's what I think.
He may have.
Well, there you go.
He may have been aware with the whole thing with the note for Hosty, which is one of the things that's discussed in the JFK movie. The note that Agent Hosty got from Oswald, which he destroyed. So we don't know what it said, and it's possible that he may have had an inkling that an attack was going to happen. Didn't know exactly where, didn't know exactly when, but maybe he knew the date, maybe he knew the day. I think that you're right. I agree with you that you're absolutely right. When he went to Russia, he was under the belief that he was on a mission to gather intelligence. I don't believe at that time he was probably necessarily being set up to be the patsy for the assassination that far ahead, but I think what probably happened at some stage was when he came back, bearing in mind that you'd have to be a pretty gullible person to turn around and say, yes, okay, I'll do that job, I'll leave the life I love, I'll leave the culture I love, I'll go and live in some country, where the culture's alien to me and I probably won't like it. So I think he was quite pliable in terms of doing what he was told by the people he was working for, which was the intelligence services. He was basically a soldier and not a particularly good one. But what he was good at doing was doing what they told him to do, not necessarily carrying out the finer points of missions. So they told him to go to Russia. He went. Then when he came back, it's like, right, who are we going to use for this thing? Let's use this guy because he's already been to Russia. We've got the communism background there. He's already got, once all of that's going to come out, that already makes him a very murky character one way or another. It's not something everybody does. So you've got this guy with an established background who's already leaning into a potential fall guy narrative. Right, okay, so now let's set him up. Let's get him a job at the book depository. Let's get him to keep an eye on these people. Tell him we need him to keep an eye on these individuals, etc., etc. So I do believe he came into contact with David Ferry. I do believe he came into contact with Clay Shaw. I doubt that Clay Shaw was privy to the, and maybe we'll talk about Ferry and Clay Shaw next, but I don't think Clay Shaw was privy to whatever the plan was. He may well have been aware that something was in motion, or he may well have suspected that something was in motion. He was probably just there to facilitate Oswald being placed in certain places at certain times and meeting certain people at certain times. So that would all form part of the background of him that would come out later. It would all form part of the picture that makes him possible or a plausible person for the assassination.
Yeah.
Ferry, I think, was probably involved to a bigger extent. He's another character. I mean, let's talk about him.
Well, can I say a few more words about Oswald?
You can. Let me dash to the bathroom while you do that.
All right. So there's lots.
I can hear you. Don't worry.
Okay. So there's so much more to be said, and we just don't have time to do like 2 hours just talking about Lee Oswald. But there are a few more things to be said. So someone in the chat, Keith E, made a very good point, talking about that Oswald was supposed to have attempted to assassinate General Edwin Walker, which is true. And then there's the Officer Tippit killing. Just the Officer Tippit killing is extremely odd. And the evidence, the eyewitness evidence, loads. It doesn't make sense. There's a few things about this story that do not add up. Now, the Tippit killing is one of them. For anyone who doesn't know, just to say, there was an officer, just a normal policeman. Officer Tippit was shot earlier in the day and killed, and they say Oswald did it. Now, the evidence for that is so weird. Some say the person they basically fingered Oswald. They said it looked exactly like Oswald. It was Oswald. A few other eyewitnesses said the guy didn't look anything like Oswald. That's the problem with eyewitness testimony. It's actually really unreliable. Some said it was a tall guy wearing this type of clothes with this type of haircut. And other people said, no, it was much, much smaller guy wearing these types of clothes. Everyone must have seen that clip.
Yeah.
Where he's down in New Orleans as a super pro-Castro guy, and then he goes on local TV saying that he's a Marxist. Okay, all these things are setting up a sort of slam dunk patsy, right? If at some point the authorities or the CIA or whoever wanted to point the finger at somebody and say, look, this is a dangerous killer dude, and he's a commie, he's a dyed-in-the-wool commie who's lived in Russia and has been on TV outing himself as a Marxist. It's all sort of adding up. Now, most people agree that Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't a Marxist, almost certainly wasn't a Marxist. Again, he's playing the intelligence game. One of his handlers, someone in intelligence, has said to him, we want you to go down to New Orleans, get involved in the Castro, go down to Miami or wherever it was, I think New Orleans, in the Castro community, the Cuban community, and get known, be a mole, basically, be known as a pro-Marxist, pro-Castro sympathizer. To infiltrate
Lafayette Street on New Orleans, and that was also where Guy Bannister's office was.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Naval intelligence, all sorts of things going on in that small area. So once again, you cannot deny that Oswald has got the fingerprints of intelligence just absolutely all over him. And once again, I do want to reiterate, he's young. He's in his early 20s. Yeah. When you're in your early 20s and you're that deep involved in espionage and counter-espionage, you're playing a game. It's like Joe Pesci said, it's fun and games. It's all fun and games. You're playing around. You're sort of LARPing at it. I've read many novels about like John le Carré books and all sorts of things in and around the sort of intelligence. And they say that that's what a lot of it is. Guys LARPing, playing around until it gets serious, until people start getting killed and stuff. But first and foremost, it's a game. It is sort of a game. So, Lee Harvey Oswald, whether he knew what was coming, I honestly doubt it. I severely doubt he killed Tippit. And I doubt he took a shot at Edwin Walker. I mean, I imagine that's just disinformation put out by the intelligence services.
Yeah,
but who knows? Who knows?
The person who had the best view of the Tippett murder said that there were two men.
Right, there you go. Yeah,
that left in different directions. So
some say it was two men, some say it was one man, and the description of him is crazily different. It's in there's a very good book, very good book called The Devil's Chessboard. It's by David Talbot, who's a bit of a lefty, but nonetheless, we'll let him off on that one. It's a very good book called The Devil's Chessboard, which does focus on Dulles a fair bit. And in that book, he talks all about the Tippett killing for a while. I think it was that book. And anyway, the witness testimony is just all over the shop. I mean, crazily all over the shop. They can't decide whether it's one person or two. They can't decide if the shot was done point blank or whether it was from the other side of the street. They don't agree on what he looked like, what he was wearing. So yeah. Anyway,
that bit's covered in. It's I mean, that's a good summary right there. The thing about the shell casings with the initials not being on them as well, is that something you've read up further where the shooting of Tippett is concerned?
No.
So the gold mine of information in JFK. What's great is that Oliver Stone presents you with a lot of facts, then he gives you some supposition. These facts might mean this, but why don't you go off and do your own digging? And that line as well is in the movie. Donald Sutherland says it, do your own digging, stir the shitstorm, and that's that's one of the things I like about the movie. It doesn't, you can argue about Oliver Stone's politics all you want, but as a filmmaker, this, I think, is a superb narrative. It got me so interested in the subject. I mean, I went out buying books, this, that, and the other, for weeks afterwards. And it really weighed on my mind. My father was very passionate about JFK. He really liked him as a world leader. And I remember the first time he talked about the assassination, which was around the time we saw the Martin Sheen thing, which was 11 years before this came out. He got very angry straight away, very angry. They murdered him. He used to shout. And my father was very adamant that he was murdered from day one. He never believed it. And I think despite the disinformation that was out at the time, despite the lack of social media, and despite this huge campaign to pin everything on Oswald, although a lot of people bought into that, you've got my father in a foreign country working in London, I think at the time Kennedy was killed. And he told me, when we talked about it, no one believed that Oswald did it in that time, when he would talk among friends, and he would meet a lot of different people because he worked in a shop in Regent Street. They had all kinds of customers coming in. And he said, the consensus was that the official version was bullshit, even before it all became debated in books and films and things. So it's interesting that even then there was such division about what actually happened.
I mean, there's even people in the chat that seem to be convinced it was a lone gunman. I'm not quite sure how Oswald from beyond the grave was able to pack the Warren Commission. I'm not quite sure how Oswald got the motorcade route changed. It simply wasn't that one 24-year-old guy. It just could not have been. Okay, so of course he was murdered. It's the same as saying Epstein just killed himself and there's nothing more to see. Or the World Trade Center 7 fell down because of office fires. It's like, no, come on, you're treating us like idiot children. Or with the Jack Ruby thing, there's no need for any trial or justice now. That's the end of the story. That's all wrapped up with a nice bow now. No, nothing more to see here. Nonsense. No.
Yeah.
No. There must have been a conspiracy. There's no other way. It just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. to think that it was Oswald acting alone, that he just had a chip on his shoulder, that Jack Kennedy was such a great man and he was such a loser. And he just wanted to be famous for being an assassin. It doesn't add up. It doesn't make any sense. Let alone the fact that it was the back of John Kennedy's head that was blown out, and everyone at Parkland Hospital attests that. Never mind that.
Well, I mean, you can see that the shot comes from the front, the kill shot. You know,
the back of his head was blown out. All the doctors said it was like a baseball-sized hole in the back of his head.
Yeah,
but there were definitely shooters shooting from behind, probably from the book depository. One of the shot that went through Kennedy's throat, that then goes through Connolly, that was coming from behind. It went down through the trajectory. Don't worry about the jump seats and the magic bullet turning in the air. That's all been explained. There were inset jump seats in that Lincoln. But the bullets were coming from behind and from the front. So simple as that. Simple as that. There's more than one shooter. I happen to think there must have been at least 3 shooters, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
At least 7 shots rang out from at least 2 different angles. Sorry, I'm talking over you, Lance. You go.
No. That's all right. Let's talk about David Ferry briefly, because there's quite a lot of other things to cover, and I don't want to keep you on until 2 in the morning. But I listen. I'm enjoying all of this. It's great. So, David Ferry, very interesting character. Brilliant performance by Joe Pesci. I mean, you couldn't have cast a better actor to play this role. I mean, I obviously I don't know what the real David Ferry was like, but there are certainly a lot of interviews with people who did know him, who were alive. In reality, you know, we know he was a closeted homosexual, part of the homosexual underworld of Dallas and so on, and also New Orleans. He had been in the military, we know that, and he had an interesting service record. We know that he worked with units that were involved with Cuba, so that's a fact. You can find that information out for yourself. We know that he was connected to Guy Bannister. So they definitely knew each other. They had definitely worked together before. They definitely worked together again when they were sort of technically working freelance, but probably both working for, you know, the intelligence apparatus, probably the CIA. They were both based at the corners, the offices on the Newman building, which was at the corner of Camp Street and Lafayette Street, which was the same address where Lee Harvey Oswald printed and distributed the pro-Castro pamphlets. And then you have that interesting scene with the secretary who complains about Oswald distributing the pamphlets in front of Ferry and Bannister, who were in the office at the time. Bannister laughs and says, "Oh, don't worry about that. He's working for us." Again, these are all nuggets of information that I always then went and fact checked. You know, did that conversation actually happen? Did that woman hear that line being said by that person? The answer to that question is yes, according to the sources that I've checked. And of course, I can only go on the sources. And the thing with Guy Bannister whipping Jack Martin on the day of the assassination, that's all true. That happened. And Martin is the one who told the reporters and authorities that Ferry may have been involved in the assassination. Now, so my take on Ferry is that he was probably part of the apparatus which set up Lee's background in order to facilitate him as being, you know, it looking like he was behind the assassination. And that apparatus overlapped with the Cuban interests, which would have been the other area that he was working in. As such, he was connected to various bits of information, which, if he unraveled as a person, went to the press or the authorities, made him a viable threat. I don't think he possessed huge amounts of information, but I think he possessed enough to probably be able to present a strong theory of what happened. This probably happened because we discussed this and we also gave this to this person and we did this for these people at this time. So that suggests that was all part of a wider picture. So I think Ferry was probably a cog, a significant cog, but still quite a small cog in a much larger picture, a much larger framework. Was he one of the people on one of the hit teams? No, I don't think so. Was he there in Dealey Plaza on the Dane? Possibly, but again, I'm not sure. It's never been proven 100% where he was on the day of the assassination. That's sort of... So again, he is another character who's a bit of an enigma, but there is quite a lot about him that is definitively known. Curious to hear your thoughts on him.
Yeah, so David Ferry is a funny character, really. I mean, he's a pilot, right? That's what he is, first and foremost, a pilot. Whether he did things for the CIA, almost certainly. But he is he is not a sort of very important key person in the whole story. Yeah, he may well have had something in order to do, whether even he knew it or not, something to do with setting up one of the many patsies I imagine the CIA was running. Lee Oswald just being the one that actually went with in the end, and whether he even knows what he's doing. David Ferry is that type of... He's a weirdo. He's a bit of a freak. They show Joe Pesci with like the wig, the crazy stupid wig and eyebrows. The intelligence services sometimes need crazy men, like weird crazy men. Some freelance pilot that would be prepared to just fly into Nicaragua and pick up loads of drugs or something and fly them back to America. So crazy dudes, right? Sometimes you need crazy characters. And I think David Ferry is just one of those. He certainly wasn't, I don't think anyone really says he was. I don't think he was some sort of senior CIA operations officer, right? He wasn't that. And yet, like all these people, there's the fingerprints of intelligence all over him. He was to do with it. He was involved in it. But yeah, a minor person, relatively minor. That's my take on Ferry, and I think the film actually does it, and Joe Pesci, they do it quite well.
I think so.
There's one bit in it, in fact, one of the Pesci scenes, where I think it speaks volumes about counter intelligence or counter espionage, or again the game. Like he talks about, man, even the shooters don't know who did it. It's a riddle wrapped inside an enigma. It's fun and games, man. Like you lose your mind. You don't know if you're... He doesn't say this now, but you don't know when you're a double agent, if you're a triple agent. You don't even know who you're working for anymore. Like it's all... As I said earlier on in this stream, one of the main tools the intelligence services use are just muddying the waters, just making it difficult to understand what happened and when. About everything, not necessarily just the JFK assassination, about all sorts of stuff. Yeah. They make it deliberately confusing, and loads of dead ends and misdirection. That's one of their main things. So it's a great scene where Pesci's basically saying that, words to that effect. I think that's...
I do really like... I mean, I love Pesci's performance in the film. From everything I've read about Ferry, I think he nailed him pretty well. The scene in question that you were just talking about is this one. I'll just stop that for a sec. I can't remember, but Pesci might have got nominated a best. There's about the CIA, and if I was, do you think I'd tell you? And and then, right at the end of that scene, there's that bit where he says, and I want to wish to each and every one of your families a very happy Easter. And it's such a veiled threat
Yeah.
Like, okay, you know, you if you're going for this, your families are going to be in the firing line. Again, in terms of like where Clay fits in, it seems to me that he was probably some kind of handler for characters like Ferry, in terms of maybe passing on information and orders. Whether he was, I don't believe he was involved in anything to do with orchestrating or planning the assassination. He may well have had conversations with people who were potentially going to be involved in it, or there may have been rumors floating around by that time, and so he may have been part of those conversations. As I think the Willie O'Keefe character, who's an amalgamation, by the way, of about 3 different people, the Kevin Bacon character, he's an amalgamation. And he says, you know, when they started talking about the assassination, and then when JFK got killed, you know, he's like, that's when I got scared. So it's you know, it's interesting. But what's your take on Clay Shaw and his involvement?
Yeah, no, I'll be brief. I tend to agree with you. Again, he's got the fingerprints of intelligence all over him. Was he a key player in some sort of assassination team? No, I don't think so at all. That's way above his pay grade. I don't think he had anything to do with that. Yeah, he was sort of running people like David Ferry or like Lee Harvey Oswald. Yeah, I think you know. So yeah, I'll leave it there. I don't think he. I think Jim Garrison was barking up the wrong tree. Yeah.
I mean, it might be that was what was presented in front of him, and I think it's said in the film. If we can get one of them on something, maybe we can start the ball rolling. I guess that was the intention, perhaps. Misguided. Let me read it. I've got a couple of quick super chats here. I'll read them out before I forget. Both from RRTNZ, who says, in JFK, Chuck Norris plays the sense of mystery. And one hair of Chuck Norris's beard made up Pesky's wig. Okay, I can believe.
Because the thing is, Garrison really should have. It wouldn't have been possible. That's the whole point. But he should have been going after people like Jim Angleton or Alan Dulles himself. And he just doesn't have the evidence. He's just not capable of it, right? It's just, I mean, Dulles only lived for a few more years anyway, but he can't prosecute the actual people. So he took what he could get, someone like Clay Shaw, who's he wasn't the guy. He wasn't the guy.
Let's talk about before we sort of because we'll get onto the actual assassination. We'll say that for the end. Okay. I want to talk about the other characters in the movie, and who they represent, and also the performances. And there are many great cameos in this movie, some of whom have just got one line. You've got one of the main actors who would go on to be a key character in Law and Order Special Victims Unit. The same actor who played Pyle in Full Metal Jacket is your guy with the kids on Elm, who saw the bullets, you know, they snapped over his head, and he was one of the key people that saw the shots coming from the grassy knoll. He was an ex-soldier. You have Pruitt Taylor Vince, very well-known character actor. Many people might remember him from Mississippi Burning, great film. He plays the railroad worker who had one of the best views of all of Dealey Plaza. Mysteriously died in a rather horrible car accident. On that subject as well, I think, if I remember rightly, there's somebody did a list once of all the people that were either present the day the assassination happened or involved in something to do with, you know, whether it's the defense of the president or whatever. And I think, like, this by the way, this was when the film came out. This was in 1991. A newspaper did it. I can't remember which newspaper it was. And they had all the pictures of all these people that had died. under mysterious circumstances. None of them had died of natural causes. There was all something mysterious. And there was like 57 of them. And they worked out that the odds of that occurring around one particular event in human history, that many people dying under mysterious circumstances, was like something like 1 billion to 1 or something. So, you know, that of itself was an interesting piece of evidence, which when you sort of start thinking about things on that kind of level. Two other great cameos are Kevin Bacon, who I have a feeling Kevin Bacon got nominated for something for this, and he's not in the film that much, but he's amazing. And then my favourite cameo of all, and my favourite scene in the movie, is this scene, which, I mean, not only is this scene an amazing piece of filmmaking, it also influenced me as a filmmaker. And I have a scene in my last movie that's very, very similar to this. It leans into the style. We have similar music. I've got similar cutaways, and we're talking about a similar topic, about different versions of events, of a historical event, and people reacting to those events. And it's all to do with a political a shooting that became very politicized in Greece. But let's just watch a little bit of this, because there's one bit in particular that I really like, where Sutherland makes several points about, we never would have allowed this, we never would have allowed that. And that, for me, that's one of the cruxes of that's the key line. You would have felt an army presence in the streets that day. And we've already covered why and how some of those elements of protection were removed. Just quickly on this sequence, absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite scenes in cinema history. You know, if I had to pick my favorite 10 scenes of all time, this would definitely be in that list of 10 somewhere. There's an idea. There's an idea for a stream. And that's down to three things. One is the incredible performance of Sutherland. The second is the incredible editing and sound design of the entire sequence. And then third, the way John Williams scores this scene with that music that builds and kind of tugs you all over the place. It's just fucking fantastic, really. What I wanted to ask you is, because again, you dug into this pretty deeply. We had that brief shot of the Umbrella Man. This is a person who was never traced, who was there. They're in various photographs, who opened their umbrella just, you know, I think less than a minute before the assassination happened, or a couple of minutes. You ever found out anything about that?
The Umbrella Man? No, I think that is one of the enigmas, right? There's a few people like the Babushka lady. There's various people that have never been identified to this day that were standing in Dealey Plaza. Some of them completely innocent, I'm sure. Some of them perhaps not. I mean, some people say there's the tramps, aren't there? You know, the story about the so-called tramps. Some say Howard Hunt was there. Some say that's ridiculous. Some say George H.W. Bush, just Bush Senior, was there, because Bush Senior was a pilot and then a CIA man. George Bush Senior was the head of the CIA, in fact, before he became vice president and then president. Some say he was actually there. He was in Dallas on that day. Some say no, it's just someone who looks a bit like him. So yeah, the Umbrella Man. I think to this day he's never been fully explained.
Yeah,
I think that's the case.
Yeah, this character is absolutely based on Fletcher Prouty, who Garrison did meet, and he expunged quite a bit of information.
Yeah, I must also completely agree with you that scene with Donald Sutherland is the best scene in the film. I made a video. I wrote an article for lotuseaters.com. Do consider checking out lotuseaters.com. I wrote an article. I write articles on there, and one of them I wrote was about JFK, which somebody liked so much they made it into a video. It's my audio. It's me narrating it, and someone else did the video editing. I did just drop that in the chat. If you see in the chat, there's just a link there is a link to that video, and in that I explicitly say,
do you want to put it in the private chat so I can
sure,
put it up on screen? Yeah,
I explicitly say this is the best scene in that film.
Yeah, I've actually watched that video. That was when I got the idea for us to do this stream. In fact,
thank you for watching that. No, absolutely. One of the things the Donald Sutherland character says, which is just sort of spot on, really, is the means, like any murder, the means, the motive, and the ability to actually do it. And in any sort of political assassination, who might benefit from it, right? These are the questions you have to ask. Just because it happens to be the president of the United States at the height of the Cold War, that's sort of incidental. It's a murder. It's still just a murder. So look at the means, motive, opportunity, who benefits, all those things.
I think he says that here.
Keeps them guessing like some kind of parlor game, prevents them from asking the most important question: why? Why was Kennedy killed? Who benefited? Who has the power to cover it up? Who?
Because
that's
one of the main
of the whole movie.
That's one of the main things I address in that article / video is the question of why. I don't talk massively about the triangulation of three different gun teams, and I don't talk much about Trafficante and Nelson Rockefeller or anything. I talk about why whoever it was, why did they need Kennedy to be dead? And that's the main thrust of that video. And it's that he wasn't on board with sort of the Cold War project, that he thought that imperialism, in inverted commas, whether it be United States, Western democratic dollar imperialism, or whether it be Soviet, the sort of international, a Comintern world domination, Marxist world domination imperialism, both of those things are bad, is what Kennedy said. Now, to people like Lyman Lemnitzer or Alan Dulles or Douglas Dillon or Curtis LeMay or whoever, they're like, no, dude, you've got to get with the program. This isn't good enough. You can say that liberal stuff when you're a senator, but when you're a president, it's not okay. And I think that's why. And that he threatened to break up the CIA and scatter it to the winds. He was suspicious of Alan Dulles. He didn't like Alan Dulles. Well, eventually, as we've said, he removed Alan Dulles. I imagine that was the last straw. Alan Dulles was like, nobody removes me from the head of the CIA. No way. Let alone this pretty boy, East Coast rich kid, liberal son of a bitch. I think that's how it went down. I think that's what happened, really.
Okay, I think that's all very likely. I'm just looking at RT and says Kennedy never died. It was all fiction, staged by Stanley Kubrick as an audition for staging the moon landing 7 years later. Yeah, I'll take that comment in the sarcastic tone that I'm sure it was meant. So going back to the characters in the movie, we should give a shout out to our Lord Kevin Bacon. Be quite remiss of me if I didn't do that, especially as he sent me that lovely tweet in lockdown. So he plays Willie O'Keefe, who's he's locked up at the time that Garrison goes to see him. He's a known rent boy, effectively, who associated with various unsavory characters in the. I think in the film he calls it. Everybody likes to make themselves out to be bigger than they are in the Dallas gay underworld, wasn't it, or something like that?
Yeah,
he says at one point. But yeah, he is phenomenal in this. He's incredible. Not a massive role, but you never forget him, and really big performance. He represents a number of characters that are amalgamations. In the extended version of the movie, we see a bit more of him, and we also see a bit more of some of Garrison's other witnesses, like the guy that was a witness that was put up by the guy that betrayed them on their own team, and then that witness turns out to be uncredible, the one who has his daughter tested when she comes back from university to see if she's the same person and not been replaced. Do you know the bit I mean? That's the extended cut.
Yeah.
What are the golden nuggets of info that you found out when you've been researching all of this that isn't covered in the movie?
For me, one of the most pivotal things is about the Warren Commission. We'll get onto that in a bit. So that's one. Everything to do with the Warren Commission. The other thing is the testimony of the doctors at Parkland. Multiple doctors, as well as assistants or nurses or people that were there. They all say he had a massive chunk of the back of his head blown out. But then there are so-called, quote unquote, autopsy pictures that don't show that. So again, it's very, very weird. It's classic intelligence services stuff, just misinformation, disinformation, all that sort of thing. But the doctors at Parkland, I believe some of them are still alive even, have always been absolutely insistent that he had the back of his head blown out. It was an exit wound, an obvious, massive exit wound in the back of his head. Okay, now, I think they're good. I don't think they're lying. I don't think those doctors at Parkland are lying about that. So if that is true, and in my mind, in my opinion, it just is true, they're not lying, that is good, a good, fair account, then he was shot from the front, let alone there's the whole back and to the left thing, and that Jackie goes over the back of the car to receive a massive chunk, try and pick up a massive chunk of the back of his head. And when you look very, very closely at the Zapruder film, the angle of certain things suggest he was shot from the front. Regardless of all of that, the doctors say there was a giant exit wound on the back of his head. So the film JFK, Oliver Stone's film, doesn't make a massive deal out of that. For me, that's a key thing. It's an absolutely key thing.
Well, it's covered personally. It's covered in the courtroom.
They do talk about it, of course. It comes up, but for me, it's a slam dunk bit of information, though.
I don't know
if that is true, then he could the sniper's nest in the book depository, if there was one, could not have been that final kill shot. Could not have been. So,
I don't know what the YouTube rules are in terms of us showing the autopsy photo in terms of graphic content. Are we allowed to do that? No. Any ideas?
Sorry.
Anyone in chat wanna? Well, okay, I'm sure we can show them because there's worse stuff. So I think these are official autopsy photos. That's like one of the wounds in the back, right? Note how we don't see the back of the head in this photograph. This is a very well-known photograph with the throat wound. And the downward trajectory of that that wound would have probably been from the back, but who can say? But yeah, I mean, it's you can't tell a lot from these, you know. These are the that's where they're saying that the kill shot came from. That of itself, when you look at the footage and compare it with everything else, it's clearly bollocks. This is supposedly
right. That picture right there, Lance.
Yeah.
What are we looking at? Because the doctors at Parkland said there was a baseball-sized hole in the back of his head. So what is that? Is that Tippett? Is that Tippett's head? Is that some other? What is that? That's not John Kennedy's head.
Yeah.
Right? And we're told that it is. Like, so wait, so what's going on? There's people in the chat saying who's clearly shot from behind. What are you talking about and stuff? It's like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Right? I mean, it's crazy the amount of nonsense that people, they can't agree that the intelligence services did their job well. That there's even the Zapruder film where you can see fragments of his head fly up and backwards diagonally, and people say no. There's people in the chat now saying no, he's slumped forward. It's like, no, yeah, I get it. I get that ballistics is a thing. I get that you can shoot a watermelon and it falls forward. I get that ballistics is the physics of ballistics is a crazy thing. Like an exit wound can be so explosive that the thing flops forward. I get that. I get that Kennedy could have been shot from behind, from the book depository, and flopped backwards or forwards. Ballistics does crazy things. The doctors at Parkland all agree he had a giant exit wound in the back of his head. Deal with that. What have you got for that, right? What is there to say?
Yeah.
I don't know what else to tell people.
Well, yeah. I mean, James, I don't agree with you. I've studied this for years, decades, in fact, and show me that footage and let's compare it to the Zapruder film. We'll see. But I have to say that the evidence is out there to the contrary. Lots of evidence. Let's go into the. Let's talk
Someone's
about
accusing
the
me of making things up.
Who is?
James Willard. Just I'm not making things up. Well, I'm making up the testimony, the well-documented testimony of the doctors at Parkland. I'm making that up. Nonsense, sir. Nonsense, sir.
Just even so, that's the real footage right there. There's Jean Hill with her red raincoat. Looking at that footage, you can clearly see that shot has come from the side to the right. Even if it did come from the back, it would have been low down from the back and to the right. It wouldn't have been. There's no way it came from up in the building. Just not possible.
I mean, so I think the shot that goes through Kennedy and then hits Connolly, that is coming from the back, right?
Yeah, that one is.
That is
for
sure. So there's more than one shooter. Then right. So it's kind of simple as that. I mean, people have looked at the Zapruder footage so closely that there's one particular frame where it's sort of the kill shot frame, and they're able to point out various different individual specific fragments of his head blowing off. Right. They've even given them some names. It's pretty, there's a massive chunk. There's a big chunk that Jackie climbs over the back of the limo to pick up, right? That's what she's doing. She's trying to pick up a bit of his head. That's why she clambers over the back of the limo. But there's one other big fragment that flies almost directly upwards, but it's not directly upwards. It's at a diagonal, but it's diagonal and backwards. And it's got its own name. I can't remember what it's called. And it's clearly visible on a cleaned up version of the Zapruder film. And again, the velocity that's flying off and the angle it's flying off, that shot came from the front. It came from the grassy knoll. And there's all this stuff about Badgeman, all about Badgeman.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I've seen.
There were two guys standing behind that picket fence. One dressed as a cop.
One was a cop, and the other one was dressed as a workman with a white helmet on.
Yeah, and there's footage. There's not footage. There's very grainy, very grainy photographic evidence of that, and you can sort of see where it got a badge on there, like a cop's badge, and they call him Badgeman. So,
I mean, you'd want, if you had a hit team on the ground, you'd want somebody dressed as a cop, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, it's great. I just don't. I do find it odd where people, because when you talk about this stuff, you get three main reactions. One is much like your reaction, which is, I agree with what you're saying. A lot of what you're saying is plausible, at least. The other reaction you get is like, of course it was the CIA and there were multiple kill teams. Like, you're just stating the obvious. It's annoying how much you're stating the obvious. You get that reaction, right? I once described Abraham Zapruder as an innocent civilian, and someone was like, "Oh, he's not innocent. He's in on it. Zapruder's in on it." Right? You get that reaction from that end of the spectrum, and the other end of the spectrum is you're a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorists. It was Oswald on his own, and those people just refuse to accept certain bits of evidence, like the fact the Zapruder film seems to show he was shot from the front, the fact that the doctors say there was a giant exit wound in the back of his head, the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't been capable of changing the motorcade route or pack the Warren Commission in a certain way to make sure that certain witnesses were never called, and when they are in the witness box, stopped before they can give key bits of evidence. Did Oswald engineer that? Did he? From the grave? I don't think so. Don't think so, I'm afraid.
Well, one of the great points before we start the slow process of wrapping up, might be one or two things still to cover. But
we've been going for a while now. When you get me started talking
for Lee Harvey Oswald, let's assume you can't. Yeah, the angry lone nut theory just doesn't, under scrutiny, with the facts that are available. I'm not talking about supposition. I'm talking about the known facts. Doesn't hold up in any court. Just doesn't hold up. So on that basis, you have to, even if he was part of the assassination, he was definitely still under orders. And if he was under orders, he was under orders from somebody in the intelligence services, therefore part of the intelligence apparatus. But I don't believe he was part of the assassination. I believe he was part of the plot in an unknowing way, very much manipulated, like you said, as a patsy. And it's a shame, in some ways. I'm not suggesting he should get a 21 gun salute or anything like that, but I feel his name should certainly be exonerated somehow.
Well,
and I wonder if that will ever happen.
I mean, I think Robert Groden, he's one of, some people might say he's the gold standard for JFK research.
Yeah,
he's written many books. He's one of the preeminent authors about the killing. I'm pretty sure he says that Oswald's an innocent man. And it's terrible that he's gone down in history as a murderer, an arch villain in the story of the United States. When he was just a patsy, he was an innocent man essentially. I mean,
one of the things I like about having this discussion with you, Bo, is obviously your political leanings are reasonably well known, shall we say, from your work on your channel and whatnot, your views. I'll call them your political views rather than your leanings. But I think it's great that you have an open mind and also a very factual and diligent approach to what is one of the most heinous crimes in human history. I do believe you're right. I do believe Alan Dulles and various people connected around him were responsible for this. I've often dabbled with the idea of writing a book that was connected to the JFK assassination somehow. And I was leaning more towards that Stephen King thing. Did you ever read that 22-11-63, which is about a man who goes back in time. He finds a time that takes him back to the 60s, and he realizes he can start winning money by gambling on things, a bit like Biff in Back to the Future. He knows who's going to win key sporting events, and then he suddenly sort of cottons on to the idea, maybe I can stop the Kennedy assassination, and he tries to stop it several times, and time keeps pushing back against him, so it keeps making him fail. And ultimately, he does succeed. And then when he comes back to the future's all changed for the worse, which is kind of an interesting twist. But I think it would be interesting to write a novel told from not like another JFK documentary book, because God knows we probably don't need any more of those. but it would be really interesting to write a novel, a fictional novel, but with factual people in it, from the point of view of the conspirators. You know, from you know, one of your main character at the beginning would be Dulles, for example, and advancing that theory and telling that story from their perspective, and use all the known facts to construct that novel in line with that theory. I think that could be a really interesting book.
It would be very, very interesting. Yeah, very, very good.
Don't know where it would stand legally, but could be.
You got the Ruby bit here. I want to say a few words about Ruby, if I may.
I'm all right for we can go a bit longer. Before we move on to him, and let's cover him before we wrap up. I just want to quickly, because I've got it up. I just want to say one of the things that sometimes gets overlooked by this film because of the various technical achievements of it, and it's a massive cast and it's a massive topic, and in a way, the name JFK kind of supersedes all others, is Kevin Costner's performance. This was the film for me that really showed, hey, this boy can, you know, he can really act. He can really take on a big role. And this speech at the end of the movie is one of the biggest speeches in cinema history. There's very few speeches that are as long as this speech. This speech is way longer than Al Pacino's Scent of a Woman speech. And most of this last section of it, if you watch it, you occasionally cut to things like how prophetic those words turned out to be. Just out of interest, for those people that have seen Groundhog Day with Bill Murray, that is the mayor of Punxsutawney Tawny from Groundhog Day. It's the same actor. So people are saying, "Oh, I recognise that guy from somewhere." That's probably what you've seen. Bill Murray's
little brother, isn't it? Jacob Leon Rubenstein, commonly known as Jack Ruby, he's one of the other absolutely pivotal figures, along with Lee Oswald. Jack Ruby, if you're going to look into the official narrative, you're not just going to swallow whatever the Warren Commission told you. You actually want to look into it for yourself. One of the absolute key figures is this so-called Jack Ruby. Who is he? Right? What's his story? Like, I'm not a little kid. Don't lie to me. Don't tell me that he just out of conviction that he couldn't stand Oswald being alive for killing his hero, John Kennedy, and he decided to take frontiers justice into his own hands, and he will be judge, jury, and executioner one day after. No, that's nonsense. That doesn't make sense. That's crazy. He was obviously used to silence Oswald. Obviously. They couldn't have Oswald going on trial. They couldn't have that. Whatever happened, that wasn't going to happen. So, Jacob Rubenstein, what is he? Who is he? What did they have over him? Who had what over him exactly? You know, so he's like a nightclub owner, right? He's a shady dude. He's completely in with the mob. He's not an actual member of the mob. He's not a made guy, right? He's not Italian or Sicilian. Both his parents were Polish Jews. So, but he's in with the mob. Okay, he's in with the underworld. How on earth did they manage to manipulate him to the point where he would go and do this? Now, I made a point on the Lotus Eaters this very afternoon that when you get accused of being a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist,
dread the thought.
Heaven forfend. The thing that puts paid to that lie is Jack Ruby literally appearing out of the shadows and silencing Oswald. It's like there's a bit in the Truman Show. I said this on the podcast today. You know the Truman Show, when he suspects what's going on and he's arguing with his wife and it's getting a bit heated and she loses her nerve and just speaks directly to the director or the producers. Do you remember that bit? Well, she's just like, save me. Someone save me. right? And it sort of confirms Truman's fear that his whole life is fake, that the whole narrative of everything he knows is in fact a construct, right? That moment in the Truman Show. For me, Jack Ruby coming out of the crowd and just murdering Oswald is that moment. It's a moment like that. It's like, oh wait, okay, so there is some sort of shadowy conspiracy theory stuff going on. Oh, there is. Oh my God. It's like, it's right there for you. It's right there. Again, I don't know how the single gunman theory people explain Ruby, because the narrative that he was just so incensed that someone had killed his beloved president and just needed to kill him now. That doesn't add up. That doesn't make sense. Like, oh, forget justice then. Oh, forget justice for one of the biggest crimes ever. I'm just going to murder him in a police station. Come on. Don't tell me Epstein hung himself. Right? We're not children. We're not idiots.
Yeah.
So yeah, the thing where Jack Ruby literally comes out of the shadows is a mask off thing. It's a mask off moment. It's like, oh, there is something afoot here. Well, there you go.
No, interesting point that somebody in chat raised. Albert Lanier, and by the way, I haven't seen you before, Albert, so welcome to the channel and thanks for dropping by. And there's quite a few new people here, actually. Sparked Brain, I haven't seen before. Do check out our other streams, especially my industry interviews. Had a fantastic one just the other day with Cindy Pickett, who played Ferris Bueller's mother in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. We had a very emotional conversation about adoption. It was quite moving. But writer Albert Lanier said Ruby died, of course, as we know, cancer, and the reporter Dorothy Kilgallen, who interviewed him during his trial, later wound up in mysterious circumstances. Now, she's one of the people I think was on that list of 51, because I immediately remembered the name. And she was very openly critical of the Warren report. Right. And she ran several front page articles about the Kennedy assassination. This is her. And she also published Ruby's testimony to the Warren Commission in 3 parts in her newspaper. Now, guess what happened to her? She died of a supposed overdose in her Manhattan apartment from barbiturates and drugs in 1965. Not sure I believe that's what happened, but
yeah. You mentioned earlier the sheer number of people that died in suspicious circumstances.
Yeah,
is quite remarkable. I won't say any more than that, but it is quite a remarkable figure.
Yeah.
But so to talk about the Warren Commission, okay.
Yes, let's.
For me, along with the doctor's evidence of the exit wound in the back of Kennedy's head, it's the Warren Commission, which is one of the most suspicious things about the whole thing. Oh, and Jack Ruby, the entire thing of Jack Ruby.
Yeah.
The exit wound in the back of Jack's head, the whole Jack Ruby thing, and the Warren Commission. If you add these things up, it couldn't have been it just could not have been Oswald alone. Anyway, the Warren Commission. So they put Supreme Justice Earl Warren in charge of it. So everyone wants there to be some sort of investigation, right? It was completely up to LBJ how to deal with it. If LBJ had wanted to, he politically probably couldn't have gotten away with it. But if he'd wanted to just say there will be no investigation, we think Oswald did it and now he's dead and that's the end of it, right? He could have done that, but politically that would have been extremely difficult. He could have gone all out, a full hangout, as they say, and got completely clean FBI guys to investigate every last detail. They didn't do that. They didn't go that route. Instead, he has a politically sensitive commission to write this report. And in fact, you've got a picture up of it there. Who's the guy? Who's the guy second from right in profile?
I can name all the people that are on it, but I don't know.
That guy second from right, who's in profile, is one Mr. Alan Dulles, no less.
Oh, sorry, yeah, trying not to get his face too prominent in this particular photo. I wonder if
on the far left is Jerry Ford, incidentally, who obviously went on to be president himself. But Alan Dulles was they got Earl Warren, Supreme Court Chief Justice Earl Warren, who is clean, obviously had nothing to do with it, but he's just the front man. In The Devil's Chessboard, as well as other books, there's lots and lots and lots of evidence that during the compiling of the Warren Commission, it was Alan Dulles that controlled things. It was Alan Dulles who said, no, we're not going to interview the driver or whatever. They did interview the driver, but so, okay, there's one example. They interview the driver and there's 1,000,001 questions you want to ask that driver. What did you know and when? What were you doing the night before exactly? Why did you slow down to not even barely walking pace at that point? When you first heard the shots ring out, why didn't you speed away immediately? You look round. 1,000,001 questions for the driver. This is just one example. And in the Warren Commission, they basically ask him nothing pertinent. And Alan Dulles says, okay, you can go now. Next witness. The number of witnesses they just omitted. So the Warren Commission is the example par excellence of lying by omission. That you're not making things up from pure fiction and passing them off as true. You just don't address it. It's just lies by omission, right? They're just not going to address many things. They're not going to grill all the doctors at Parkland, right? And so Alan Dulles was the leading force behind that. All accounts agree. And now he's the man who had, if our conjecture is true, he's a man that should be in the witness box himself. But no, he is investigating what I would say, allegedly, are his own crimes. And surprise, surprise, he finds himself completely innocent. Let's bring Ruby in front of the Warren Commission and grill him for days on end about everything about his life and connections. And why did you do this thing? Who told you to do this thing? How did you get into that? How did you get into that police underground parking thing? No. They didn't do any of it. The Warren Commission is a whitewash, the worst whitewash of all time. Now, how could the lone gunman, 24-year-old Lee Oswald, have contrived all of that? It's just not possible.
Yeah, I agree.
There you go.
Here, I mean, you can view the Warren Commission's report. I use that term loosely. Online, where the individual records are of the actual questions they put. I'm assuming they don't make up part of this report because these would be summaries under the various categories. Is it also possible to find? Have you seen that information?
What? Sorry.
The actual breakdown of a Q&A with each witness.
No, I haven't. The Warren Commission is like this thick. It's a super thick document. I've looked at it before, but I haven't read the whole thing cover to cover. One of the best books, as I say, David Tolbert, where he talks about it in detail. Because here's the key point: is there's loads of things that aren't in the Warren Commission. You could read the Warren Commission, but it doesn't tell you the whole story. What tells you the whole story are people that were actually there, but other people that were on the commission. Jerry Ford's account of what was or wasn't said, and who wasn't called, and all that sort of thing. So you could read the Warren Commission back to back, cover to cover, and still not really get to stuff. There you go. That's Talbot's book.
Yeah, I might well
very
pick
good.
up a copy of that.
It is one of the better ones I've read, I must admit.
Right. Yeah, I'll put it on my Christmas list and see if Santa packs it in his sleigh for me. So, summing up the movie, so the Warren Commission basically was it was not a fact-finding mission. Let's put it like that, because they didn't really find out anything. They just went with the narrative of Lee Harvey Oswald, and everything was geared towards solidifying that narrative. In terms of the the movie, for those people that don't know, there are a couple of different versions of it. The extended director's cut is actually better in terms of giving you a wider picture of everything that Garrison went through. It's not necessarily a better film in terms of technical or pace or whatever, because the film, of course, is already very, very long. But overall, I would say it's a stronger movie, because I like extra information, because I'm all about the fact. So you'll remember I said at the beginning on my own movie, I lent into the whole Donald Sutherland sequence. And for anybody who wants to see this film, by the way, it's on my channel. You can watch it for free. If you watch it and you like it, please do a review of it on IMDb, because they're always helpful. It's a true story. It's shot in Greece with a tiny budget. And in one of the scenes, they talk about the main character, or one of the main characters in the movie. This is my movie here. Talks about to the tourists. The film is about 3 tourists who go to Greece. One of them is actually from there. The other 2 are not, and none of them plan on coming home. What they've got in common is each of them have lost somebody. And one of them is befriended by the owner of the hotel he's staying in. And he finds, later in the film, he finds that owner in hotel who's been drinking. He's quite drunk, and he offers to walk him back to the hotel to make sure he gets back safely. And the guy starts ranting about this sequence of events that changed everything in Greece. And when he's talking about these events, basically, he tells him the story of the shooting of Alexandros Grigoropoulos, who was basically a kid who was from a well-to-do family, a middle-class, quite rich Greek family, who was in the area of Zathia, which is a sort of inner suburb of Athens. And he was with a group of other children. They came across 2 off-duty plainclothes Greek police officers. There was a verbal confrontation. One of the officers pulled out a firearm, despite being off-duty, fired several shots at the kids, and Grigoropoulos was killed. And this wasn't like in the UK where, you know, somebody dies at the hands of police. There's a bit of a kickoff. This was the same. That death had the same impact in Greece as the Tottenham riots did in the UK when they spread all over. But these were different. They were protests mainly led by families who came out and protested all over the country. And the country literally shut down for a couple of weeks. It was a really big thing. So one of the things that we did for the movie, because I wanted to, when the guy talks about it and he says it's basically Greece's darkest hour, I wanted to shoot the scene like the Donald Sutherland scene in JFK, and I wanted all this footage to cut to of the actual event. So what we did was we took some actors and we recreated the shooting. And then I got some news footage of the riots that followed. But we also got to go. We saw when we were in Athens, we saw all these police debussing, all these riot police debussing because there was a protest when we were there filming. So we decided to get onto one of those tourist buses, you know, the ones that just take you around town. And it was great. We were dressed like tourists, but we had all our cameras and stuff. But because we were on the tourist bus, the police didn't pay us any attention. So we got all these great shots. And then when we went into Zathia to recreate the murder, the 2 kids that were with us who were playing sort of the friends of Grigoropoulos were actually the 2 kids who were the first 2 kids to reach his body when he'd been shot.
Oh, wow.
So we actually had these 2 guys who were there on the day replaying their parts effectively, although, of course, they were older. I'll show you a brief bit of it, but you'll see how much it leans into the film JFK, this sequence. This is why this film had such a massive effect on me. Let me know if you can hear the sound okay.
It showed us there was a sickness waiting to take root. For the first time, it wasn't just the usual suspects, the extremists or attackers.
You can hear the music's even quite similar to the
all
sequence.
standing side by side. Even friends of mine were there. They weren't just angry at the police, but at the government who had let them down with their endless incompetence and corruption, full of broken promises. Everyone cried out, and for just a moment, it seemed like things would change. But the change, it never came. The government did not heed the signs, did not treat the symptoms. And well, in less than a year, the financial crisis started. The death of that boy could have given us all a chance, just when the country was almost united. Just like it was before. Just like it was.
Oh, I get chills watching that because it brings back loads of memories of when we shot it. But you see what I mean? How I lifted it from the. So I was totally and contrasting these horrible moments of Greece's history with this incredible, beautiful vista of where they happen to be walking, because the real wealth of Greece is its beauty. You know, I've always said it. It's tourism is its number one export. But that scene is actually much longer. I just showed you guys a real short bit of it, and yeah, so you know, JFK inspired me in more ways than one, and definitely impacted me as a filmmaker. And these are the kids who played. This is the kid playing Alex, and
they say they were
this is the policeman that shot him, and the gun being pulled out and all that. And again, we shot it in all these different ways so that it looks like it's just somebody caught it on their phone. You know, that was the idea. And so yeah, Oliver Stone, man, your influence, you know, hit me creatively, absolutely. And I often look at JFK and think, how can I make a scene interesting? Can we do something in that style? Not that you don't, you take, it's like what Quentin Tarantino did. People will say in the chat, hey Lance, look a bit like him. You know, I've heard that before. But he took stuff from films he grew up with, and he took the bits of him that he liked, and then he put them in his own movies, and he kind of made it his own. And that's sort of what I was trying to do here. Learn from the best, as they say. So what would you give JFK out of 10 if you were scoring out of 10 as a movie?
Oh, a higher 9. I think it's a great movie. I've watched it too many times. Every couple of years or so I watch it again. I think it's a brilliant movie. The only reason I wouldn't give it a 10 is because I'm such a history nerd that I do have to detract a tiny amount for where Oliver Stone wrote in something which is factually incorrect. And I don't particularly blame him for it. There's artistic license and all that sort of thing. But that's the only reason I couldn't give it a full-blown 10. But I give it a higher 9. I think it's a brilliantly told story.
Yeah.
As I say, I think the whole Garrison thing, Clay Shaw thing, is it's a cul-de-sac. It's a dead end. It's not actually important. But this film.
It probably works in terms of exploring the topic, though. It's a good vehicle
Absolutely.
for that.
Absolutely. As a story, as a movie, it's superb. It looks great. The acting is superb. It's written very well, despite a few factual inaccuracies. So I give it a very, very high 9. I think it's a superb film. It's one of my favourite films of all time.
Thank you.
What about you?
Yeah, people in the chat, please give it your rating out of 10. I'd love to know what you think about it. Jim D, 10, it's a masterpiece. Darth, I don't agree with the content, but it's still a 9. Well, that's all right. And you know, we don't have to agree on this channel.
No, that's fine, yeah.
As a film, it's an easy 10. Yeah, I give it, I've probably already rated it on IMDb, but if I haven't, it would definitely be a 9. I mean, in terms of a masterclass of filmmaking and the quality of the acting, it's definitely a 10 for me. And again, it's a film that I play frequently, at least once a year normally. Sometimes when I'm I need inspiration, it's a film that I put on because it just it fires me up creatively to kind of want to do better. You know, I might have it on in the background sometimes when I'm working.
I've done that before. I've just put it on in the background before while I'm clearing up or doing some washing or something.
You find yourself stopping watching big chunks of it, though, don't you? You think, I can put it on there. I've seen it before, but then you know the big juicy bits come up, and you're like, I like this scene. And it can become quite distracting. Did it win Best Picture for 91? I don't know. Would it have been the Oscars of 1992 though? Because I think it came out general release. I'm not sure when that was. Let's have I'll tell you what. I'll have a quick butchers to see what awards it did win. So I've got the Wicker. It won 2 Academy Awards for Best Cinematography, truly deserved. Best Editing for Joe Hushin and Pietro Scalia, totally deserved. I think they're both still alive as well. John Williams was nominated. The sound design team were nominated. Tommy Lee Jones was nominated for Best Supporting Actor. Stone was nominated for Best Director. It was nominated for Best Picture, but it didn't win it. So... and it won Best Editing and Best Sound at the BAFTAs and Best Director Golden Globe. So yeah, there you go. So got some BAFTAs that definitely earned the BAFTAs it got. But History Bro, thanks so much for coming on. Quite a long stream, almost 3 hours, almost the length of the movie.
Thank you for having me.
Which feels appropriate. What have you got coming up? I do have the links for your YouTube is actually down below in the YouTube in the blurb below. So if you do want to check out Beau's YouTube channel, please do. But yeah, tell us quickly what you got coming up.
Yeah, no. So loads of things. I've got my own channel, History Bro, where it's just straight up my history content. So there's all sorts of stuff on there, from Göbekli Tepe to Richard Nixon. The whole swathe of history, human history, quite a lot of ancient history stuff on there. My background is classical history. So there's my channel, History Bro. I also work, my day job is at the podcast of the Lotus Eaters. I'm here in the second studio right now, where I've got my own quote unquote show on there, history themed, called Epochs. That is behind the paywall. You have to pay £5 a month to check out the 180 plus episodes I've got there. But what isn't behind the paywall is the daily podcast. I'm on that too, sometimes 3 times a week. I was on it today, in fact, talking about JFK again, because it's 61-year anniversary. Also started a new channel with Mr. H of Mr. H Reviews called the State of Politics. There's only 2-3 videos up on that at the moment, so do check that out. And you can also find me on Twitter, just as Bodade. That's my real name, Bodade on Twitter. And that's about it. And occasionally appear on other bits and bobs, but appear on Mr. H Reviews usually once a week. So yeah, no, just remains for me to say thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Oh no,
love talking about it. We only scratched the surface still, and so if I was a bit heated to somebody in the chat, I don't mind people that disagree. In fact, I enjoy it, but to just be said that you're a liar, that I'm making things up, can't really have that.
I did say, and again, we don't have to agree. Me and Beau don't.
Yeah, that's fine. That's absolutely fine.
My life would be extremely boring if I only surrounded myself with friends who agreed with everything I said, because otherwise we would never have any discussion. But I do caveat that with, I don't like people being rude to my guests in the chat. So moderators, obviously, there was somebody who got banned, I think, tonight actually. And I did have words with the other person concerned. So you can disagree with my guests all you want, but always be polite, please.
No, thanks for having me. And we'll have to pick another great movie. We could do this sort of in-depth thing. I could do another 3 hours talking about JFK. I'm not even exaggerating or joking. But I mean, the film Nixon. That's a
and do you know what? That's a film that I've not watched in a long time.
Lance, how about in the new year we do Nixon? I'd love to do
Nixon in the new year.
Because I could talk all about the real events and the real history of the Watergate break-in.
Well,
And
there was a new mini-series I've just seen about the Watergate. You must have seen it. I forget.
I haven't.
It was told from the point of view of Libby and the guys that were in charge of that operation.
Right.
And you know how that operation was like quite a big fuck up. You know, like they accidentally locked themselves out at one point. All the different things that went wrong.
It's completely bungled, complete amateur hour. On my channel, History Bro, just to plug that again, on my channel, History Bro, early on in the channel's history, I do have, what, a 5-part, 8-part, I can't remember, a multiple-part series all about Watergate.
Right.
So I find it a fascinating story. Absolutely.
Well, I can't remember the name of that series, but check it out. I think... can't remember if Ed Harris was in it playing Howard Hunt. They had a really big name, like playing.
Well,
Hunt
in Oliver Stone's Nixon, it's that's who plays Howard Hunt, isn't it?
Was it? No, this was some. I can't remember who it was, but that there was in this new series there was quite a big name playing that role. In fact, they had a number of exceptionally gifted actors. It was a great little show, and I think it was about like 4 or 5 episodes. I think I've got a feeling it dropped in the lockdown, but I might be. Let me just get the name of that for you before we go, because I'm curious myself now. TV miniseries about Watergate. Let's see, because I'm surprised you've not heard of it, because it was Gaslit. That was it. It was.
Right.
So there's Gaslit, and there's also the White House Plumbers. So there's 2.
Right.
So there's Gaslit with Julia Roberts, who I think that's the story of the wife of Howard Hunt. And then there's the White House Plumbers, which is, the White House Plumbers is a really good show. Very funny. I showed a clip of it at my Christmas movie quiz last year. And at one point, these are the 2 lead actors. Woody Harrelson plays Hunt. And Justin Theroux plays the other key guy. And there's a scene where Hunt goes to Theroux's house for dinner. And Theroux thinks that it's appropriate to... And the 2 wives are with them as well. So it's a very sort of cordial, middle class, kind of let's get to know each other dinner evening. And Theroux's character decides it's appropriate to put on Hitler's great speeches, which he's got on vinyl as entertainment. It's a proper hilarious scene, and the 2 wives are like, "Have you got any jazz or something?" No, but listen to this; it's really powerful.
Is he playing Gordon Liddy? I take it he's playing Gordon Liddy.
Right, he's playing Gordon Liddy. He's really good. So it's an HBO miniseries, The White House Plumbers. So perhaps what we could do is we could do the same thing we've done here, and we could tie it in with that, and you could watch it in the meantime, because that would fit very in keeping with what I do on the channel. And I also think you would really enjoy this show. It's very funny, but it's also, from what I could tell, it was pretty accurate. That would
I'm absolutely fascinated with the figure of Nixon, least of all the Watergate break-in. So anything about Hunt or Liddy or anything like that. Yeah, right up my alley. Absolutely.
Drew Gordon suggested this is another good topic. The Jonestown Massacre has a lot of dodgy oddities. That's another one I'd be interested in. There's a great documentary on that. There's a TV movie, which is quite old now. That could probably benefit from a more modern miniseries or something. So, guys, just to let you know what's coming up on the channel, don't forget to check out my industry interviews. I've done absolutely loads of them lately. This one will be number 88 in 2 years. I've got 2 DJs from the British music scene coming on, Adele Adaya and Charmin Love, who's just starting out in Brighton. So it's great. We've got someone who's just starting out coming on with someone who's really established, so that they can have a bit of Q&A almost with me kind of acting as the ref to a degree. So that's on Tuesday, I think at 7 p.m, slightly earlier than normal. I've just had actress Cindy Pickett on. That was so moving. Do go back and watch that. That's on the channel now. And we'll be back on Tuesday with the Nielsen ratings, reviewing all the latest film and TV. We just got into June, Prophecy, and Gladiator 2. last week, which I don't think you enjoyed any more than I did, Bo. So
no,
bit of a disappointment, sadly. This wasn't even fun. That's the thing that we were, even if the history is nonsense, at least the film could have been fun, but it just wasn't really much fun, to be honest. Anyway, that's it from us. We've been going 3 hours. Thanks very much to everyone in the chat. Thank you for the super chats, at a few of them. Always a really interesting topic. Thanks for coming on. You're always a fantastic guest.
Thank you.
Don't forget, people, we'll see you all soon.